Hello there. I've got some technical issues again, annoyingly, so if you can hear me, bear with me. I'm going to try and get it on the other event because it's on this event, so all part of it, I suppose. Cool, awesome. Okay, well, I'm going to run with this. Hopefully, anyone that's on the other event, hopefully they'll jump on this one. Just give me 2 seconds to restart a couple of little things here, and then we'll jump straight into it. I'm going to start by playing along to a track I've been working on. Hopefully, be kind of interesting, just while everyone's kind of jumping across. So bear with me for 2 seconds while I get that set up. Cool. I can see that there's 3 other people here, but I don't know who they are. So whoever the other people are, can you just say hi for me, so I know who you guys are? And Casey boy, whatever name, however you say that. Who is that, by the interest? Who are you? Oh, awesome. Hi, James. How you doing? Cool. Right. Oh, cool. I could have figured that out, I suppose. Right. Hopefully you guys can hear all of this okay. So yeah, I'm just going to have a bit of a play along to a track I've been working on. It's certainly not perfect, but I thought it'd be an interesting, interesting sort of thing for you guys to see. You know, something kind of in the makes is something that I've been practicing. I know, okay, got some feedback from you guys a bit last week that you liked seeing me play the style lesson, so I'm going to keep that going. So this is a track off of a album by a drummer called Pete Ray Bigging. It's an album called, I think, P-Bug, Drums at the Front. This is one of the title tracks, Dance, Dance, Dance. Like I said, not perfect, so you'll see lots of little mistakes here, but that's kind of the point. So cool, I'm just going to, it looks like some more people have kind of come across. So yeah, so I'm just going to have a quick play, let everyone else join and let you kind of hear some drums, and then we'll jump into this. So let me just check this is all okay. Yeah, it looks like it is. Wicked. Cool. Right, here we go. Enjoy. Cool. So, like I said, that was a track by the band P-Bug, or Pete Ray Biggins. He's the drummer. His band, called Dance Dance Dance. Really good album. You should definitely check it out. Drums at the front. Definitely highly recommend it. Cool. So, before we jump into things, I want to do a little bit of housekeeping. Now, this is our second one. Thank you, James. Appreciate the comment. So a couple of little things here that I wanted to say. So just a reminder of kind of what this thing is for anyone that's joining today that either hasn't seen the catch up from last week, or if you just need a reminder. This is essentially a free, well, we'll probably go to about 7 today, but for half an hour to 45 minutes, maybe an hour sometimes, drum lesson, giving you an opportunity to ask some questions during the week between your lessons, essentially. So that's kind of the plan. So what I wanted to do is just sort of each lesson, I'm going to play something at the start and then just do a little bit of this housekeeping stuff. And then we'll jump into either questions and answers, depending on what the session is, or like today's lesson, a particular subject. We're going to be talking about practice routines today, essentially. So, so that I can not have to keep sending out text messages all the time, if you can, sounds like a super cliche YouTuber thing to say, it's not what I'm trying to do here, but still, I'm going to say it. Please do subscribe to the YouTube channel and hit the little bell notification so that you can get reminded when these lessons are. It is also on your Notion account, so at the bottom of your notes there will be, I'll always have the updated schedule there. So this lesson has been on there for a little while, so you can click on that link and you can set a reminder so you don't forget when that is as well. If you prefer, it's not happening today because the platform that I wanted to use to stream to multiple platforms, for some reason the server was down, so I couldn't get it to work. So this is only on YouTube today, but I do want it to on YouTube and Twitch. So if you prefer watching on Twitch, then follow me on Twitch so you'll get notifications about that as well. It might actually be on Twitch at the moment as well. Cool. So yeah, that's the first things. Also, please do make sure, and I had a couple of questions come through on the Notion thing, which is great. I'm glad that everyone's using that, which is awesome. But please do feel free to chuck as many questions in there. The more questions that I've got, the more live streams I'm going to do, essentially. So if you have questions, please do chuck them in the Notion account. Or if you're here during the live stream, then obviously feel free to chuck them in the message at any point during the lesson. And if they're relevant to the lesson, then I'll talk about them today. If not, I'll put them on the list, and we'll definitely get around to do that. Cool. So before we get started, I can see there is a couple of you in here. Could you? I've already seen that James has named himself James Oak, so there's James. I can see Nafiz in here as well, and obviously Isaac as well. If there's anyone else in here, please do say hi. I want to try and create a bit of a community between you guys. So I'm going to start asking you guys some questions as well. So first question for you guys today is if you can just put, it would be great to hear essentially how long you've been playing for and what kind of level you're at as well. So if you're working through grades, just mention, say, 3 years, grade 2, or whatever it is that you've been working on. So if you could just put in the chat, your name, not the full name, just the first name, because we get first name basis here, guys, come on. And how long you've been playing drums and what kind of level you're at. I think it'd be good for us to sort of all kind of know where each of us at, so we can kind of help each other. So the people who are a little bit ahead can help with that, and you'll be surprised how much getting questions from people who are working through things that you've already been through. You'll be surprised how useful that can be as well. So. Hey, Izzy, I assume that's Isabel. So, hi, Isabel. So, Isabel, for your sake, if everyone can put in the chat who they are, and how long they've been playing, and roughly what kind of level they're at, that'd be awesome. Cool. Okay, so while you guys are doing that, I'm going to jump into the today's subject, which is practice routines and practice in general, essentially. So, I'm going to be going through my practice routine. I'm going to be going through kind of what I recommend as a practice routine as well, so sort of general things that are good for the practice routine. Practice rules as well, so things that are good to kind of follow by during your practice. Practice tips as well, so just random little tips. And some practice tools as well, so some bits that I think will be really, really helpful for you during your practice. Cool, and then we'll get into, if there's any other questions or anything, then we'll save those for the end there as well. Cool, let me just double check this is all okay. Looks like it is. Wicked. Awesome. So let's jump into the first thing then. So essentially, my practice routine, which is the question that I got from James last week, actually, which is why I thought I'd do it this week. Practice routine, or my personal practice routine, changes so much, and is something that I'm constantly trying to develop and constantly trying to try a lot of different things, and doesn't always work as well. So yeah, so it's something that I think is quite personal. So essentially, I've kind of fallen on to this kind of practice routine. So I will start with a warm-up. So maybe for me at the moment, there's a great warm-up called Lifetime Hands, or Great Hands for a Lifetime, something like that, by a drummer called Tommy Igoe. And he does some warm-up practices things, or warm-up sort of play-along things that are all rudiment-based, all on the snare drum. So I start with that. That's kind of my warm-up at the moment. My warm-up will sort of interchangeable, but for the moment, that's kind of what I'm doing. Then I will do a study time, or what I kind of refer to as a study time. So this is specifically something that I want to work on. This might be at the moment. This is the P-Bug book. That's what I've been working on at the moment, because I just really like that stuff. Before that, it was like another book by a drummer, it's over there somewhere, called Benny Greb. He has a great book called The Language of Drumming, so I was working through that as well. So that middle kind of bit is my kind of hard practice. That's the kind of study routine essentially there. That's what I kind of do. Start with a warm-up, then do a significant chunk on a study. Sometimes I will do more than one study, but I personally like it just sort of jumping in and doing one thing at a time, and spending, you know, however long I'm going to do, I spend just working on that one kind of study. And then I don't always get around to do this, which is definitely not a good thing. I'm not practicing what I preach currently, literally. But I do recommend at least leaving some time at the end, or sort of in the middle, to be creative behind the drum kit as well. We can often, I fallen into this all the time. In fact, I was doing it when we were, during that song at the beginning, I was reading the music, and I gave myself a little bit of leniency for you guys, and to sort of see me in a creative field, to jump off the page occasionally and kind of come up with my own stuff. So I definitely recommend taking some time to be creative behind the drum kit, and find some exercises that help your creativity, and, you know, be it trying to write some drum grooves, or trying to come up with some cool drum fills based on a certain rudiment, for example. And then it is really important to make sure you have some free time behind the drum kit. I've kind of grouped this, for me at least, in with that kind of creativity sort of section of my practice routine. I will, for example, choose a rudiment and sort of play around with that. And if I get inspired to do something else from that point, then I'll kind of let myself kind of go off and do whatever I want for a little bit. And that's kind of my free time / creativity. So in short, a warm-up, a study piece, and or a study thing, and then something creative. I feel like that really ticks a lot of the boxes. And, you know, not all of us can sit down and do 3, 4, 5 hours of practice, and you'll be surprised how quick even an hour of practice can go, or even a half hour of practice can go. So that's kind of leading me into the recommended practice routine. For the recommended practice routine, to kind of curate what I talked about there, I think it's really important that you tick a couple of these boxes. What's going on in the chat first before I jump into that? Oh, cool. So so James says, hi, I'm James. Been playing for around 4 years and having lessons with me. Cool, super. For the last 2. Currently working as grade 6. So and James is the one that asked the question about practice routine. So again, helping everybody out here. Not seeing any replies from anybody else. So if you want to chuck in there, then great. If not, don't worry. If you want to get involved, that'd be great. It'd be good to get you guys chatting a little bit. And sort of talking future stuff, I will be setting up the Discord server to get you guys chatting about things, and be putting prompts in there about, like, what's your favorite drum manufacturer and all that kind of stuff, to kind of get a bit of conversation going. Awesome. So moving on from there, a recommended practice routine. So that's what works for me. But in general, what I try to recommend is to at least do something that ticks these following boxes. So something that is either specifically working with your hands or just in general your technique. So hand technique based sort of practice. So for me, this is the warm up sort of side of things. There's lots of rudiments and things in there, but that will be stuff that's specifically working on my hands and my technique. So I definitely recommend doing something to do with technique, mostly sort of based on your hands, or if you're working on certain bass drum techniques, that kind of stuff. And then it'd be great to make sure you're ticking off something that is kind of groove and timing based. So for me, at the moment, this is playing along to the track that you heard at the start. That whole book is all about sort of groove and sitting with a band, and it's sort of technique based because there's lots of kind of interesting fills and stuff going on in there. But for the most part, for me at least, it's groove and timing based. So that's really, really important as well. And then, like I said before, something kind of creativity based as well, which I'll get through. I want to show you, I want to do a little bit more playing, and I want to put myself in a bit of a position because I've kind of done it so that I did my warm up, practiced a little bit to the track, which is my current study thing, but I haven't done my creativity thing. So I figured I'll jump into that in a second and show you kind of an idea to be creative, and I'm going to make it up on the spot, and I haven't even thought about what I'm going to do for that, so I'll jump into that in a second. Again, put myself out there so you can see, you know, how we do it. Sometimes I think there can be a little bit of disconnect between student and teachers, and you know, I was in your position, all of your positions, at some point. So yeah. And then finally, I kind of drummed this into that of my practice routine, creativity and free time. I think it's really good to give yourself just some time to sit and play the drums as well. We can often neglect that, and we can kind of think that, cool, we do our practice, that's it, then we move on from there. So yeah, it's good to give yourself a little bit of time to actually play the drums and kind of enjoy being behind the drums. You've worked really hard and you've been practicing really hard to play the drums sufficiently. So play the drums, take some time and put your favorite song on, or drum solo, whatever you want to, whatever you enjoy doing, make sure you leave some time to do that. And if you put it at the end of your practice, then it's kind of a little bit of a, well done, you've done some practice, have some fun and play the drums. Cool, good, Nafeez. I've been playing for a year and a bit, and doing the grade 4 now, yeah, so we're working really hard, working towards that as well, so awesome. So, cool, so before I jump into the next kind of bits, like I said, I'm gonna do a little bit of playing for you guys. Now, let's think. I want to do something creativity based. My personal favourite thing to be creativity based, there's two things actually. So we'll see how quick you guys are at responding and choosing. So I'm going to give you option 1 or option 2, and you guys can choose which one I do. So option 1 is going to be applying a rudiment. So and I'll choose a random rudiment, but doing something creative with a rudiment. And then pattern option 2 is going to be doing something with a kind of musical idea, so a rhythmic idea. So whoever says it first, I don't really care. We'll go with whoever says it first. Option 1 or option 2. So option 1 is rudiment based. Option 2 is rhythmic based. So I'll give you guys a minute or two to respond to that because I think there's probably a bit of a delay. And yeah, whoever says that, option 1 or option 2, just go ahead and choose, and then I'll jump into that. Okay, thanks, Isaac. Just beat you. Good. Okay, cool, awesome. So, okay, you've switched around now, fine. Okay, so option 2 is an interesting one. I'm kind of glad you chose this because, in fact, a little bit earlier, I was watching a drum solo by a drummer called Benny Greb from that book I was talking about earlier. And the one thing that he talked about that really resonated with me is the idea of picking a rhythmic motive and then soloing around that. So that's what I'm going to try and do. I am terrible at this, by the way. So, yeah, cool. Oh, Armin's in the house as well. Cool. So hi, Armin. Great, so yeah, here we go. I'm going to play for, it's 35 past, so I will stop at 40 past. So 5 minutes or so, just coming up with some ideas based around a rhythmic idea. I think this is quite a fun thing to do, so let's see how that goes. I'm going to start with counting or coming up with the rhythmic idea. I'm just going to play it on the hi-hat for a second. And then I will jump into kind of soloing with it. Again, soloing is not my thing, so don't judge. Shush. Cool, there you go. So that was just a little bit about, again, sort of picking up that rhythmic idea. Hopefully you heard it. And I find that, me personally anyway, I work a little bit better when, like soloing and kind of coming up with ideas when you've got that kind of underlining feel. Sometimes solos can feel like, and again, it's not my thing, but sometimes solos can feel like just kind of, here's a groove, here's a feel, here's a kind of a thing around the kit, here's another thing. And when I heard Benny Greb doing just that at a live show, he did a very, very similar thing, which is why I always kind of refer to, kind of come back to that rhythm. It just sounded just musical, which was, you know, quite impactful on the drum kit. So hopefully you heard that rhythm, ba, ba, da, 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 da. And I just kind of picked that out. Occasionally I was being more obvious with it. Sometimes I was being a little bit more sort of free with it. Sometimes I ruined it and kind of missed the rhythm. Sometimes I was a little bit too obvious, and kind of vice versa. So I definitely recommend spending a little bit of time, again, being creative behind the drum kit. But in short, as a practice routine, do something with your hands, something technique-based to work on, again, your technique. Something kind of groove and timing based. It's kind of the fundamental of being a drummer is keeping good groove and good timing. So definitely you need to spend a good amount of time on that. Something creative based, and then also just give yourself some time to enjoy being behind the drum kit. Awesome. So I will keep prompting you guys to sort of pick on some few things as well. If you have any questions of anything I talked about, or if you want me to go into more detail of anything, then do just say, and I'll make sure I kind of jump back and forth between them. Cool. Okay, so jumping into some kind of general sort of practice tips and practice rules, and then I'm going to finish off with some practice tools as well, some of my favorite kind of tools that I've sort of accumulated, be it sort of just mentally or physical kind of tools. So some practice rules, first of all. So this will kind of feed into why I've chosen those particular things to be in your practice routine. So first of all, it's about always working on things that are challenging for you. If you sit behind the drum kit and you are just playing away and it feels really easy and it feels great and it sounds amazing, then you are not practicing, you are playing the drums. And again, we allocate time for that. But it's really important that you do things that are going to make you progress. So you have to sound terrible when you practice. It's just part of it. And I know there can be a little bit of anxiety around like sounding bad behind the drum kit, especially when you're practicing, but that's kind of the point. You should be working on things that are challenging for yourself. So in general, just always work on things that you can't do rather than the things you can do. The other thing is also we kind of talked about this already, but understanding the difference between practicing and playing the drums. This ties into, again, doing things you can't do, but also understanding where the kind of line is, because it's not as easy as saying, right, I can't do this, therefore I work on it, because sometimes you can kind of do things. And again, that is the difference between practicing drums and playing drums. It's going to be about, you know, if you sit behind the drum kit and you can comfortably do what you're doing, then you're not practicing, you're playing. If you can sit and you can play along to a song, sometimes that can be practicing. You know, technically me playing along to that track earlier was practicing because it's something that I can't really do yet. But I was definitely not as efficient there because I wasn't going through and practicing all the little finer details, for example. Cool. And then the final thing, just as a general sort of practice rule of kind of ethos, is thinking about, well, it's repetition, essentially. And some of you will know, I get you guys to do this quite regularly, the kind of, I do it as a rule of 4 in the lesson because it takes some time, but you definitely want to sort of expand on this. But essentially, you're going to repeat, let's say, for example, you're working on a 1-bar drum groove, and there's a particular bit in it that you know you're struggling with. You want to be able to sit there and repeat that over and over and over and over again so that it feels comfortable. But when is it comfortable enough, and when do you know to move on? Well, my second drum teacher told me this, and it stuck with me ever since. I like to use the kind of, I'm going to call it the rule of 4 game, because we normally use a 4, but you could do it in kind of multiples of 4. So 4, 8, 16, or whatever you want to do. But essentially, it goes like this, and some of you already know this, but let's say, for example, you choose, I'm going to be able to repeat it, I want to repeat it 4 times in a row before I move on. Now, the key is to repeat it 4 times in a row without making any mistakes. So let's say, for example, you nail number 1, number 2, you get through that one, but number 3, you make a mistake on. You don't then go from number 3 and do 1 more and call it a day. No, you go back to the beginning and you do 4 again. You get to number 1, you make a mistake, go back to 0 again. And then eventually, even if you make, I was doing this with a student the other day, and they made a mistake on the and of the 4, the very last note of the 4th time. And we're like, no, not good enough, we're going back to the start again. Because you don't want to just about scrape it through. You want to be confident with things. So rules of repetition and this kind of rule of 4 game, really, really important. And it's a great measure to know when to stop as well, because sometimes everyone says repetition is key in drumming. And you could, for example, just go on and on and on and on and on and on. You don't really want to do that. You want to know, okay, that's good enough. Now I can maybe come back to it next practice and make sure it's excellent. But you want to be able to move on and get more stuff done. And we don't want to be stuck on the first of the groove we're playing just because we need to be able to repeat it more. So use that kind of rule of repetition, I suppose. Aim during your practice, definitely aim for more than 4. Aim for at least kind of 8, and kind of using rules of 4s help because most Western popular music is based around 4s. So yeah, definitely do a little bit on that. So that kind of gets through the kind of rules. Let's talk about practice tips. So I'm just going to throw loads of kind of interesting little tidbits at you, and hopefully some of this will make you think, oh, okay, I'm not really doing that in my practice, and that will help with this particular thing that I'm doing at the moment. I may, looking at this, no, I probably won't do that. I was going to maybe play along to that track I was working on or a certain bit of it and use one of these practice tips. I may do that. We'll see. So a couple of tips for you. First of all, I use this all the time. Again, a teacher from college told me this. He used to say, if you can't say it, you can't play it. And essentially what that means is essentially you want to be able to, you know, say your patterns as you go. So that let's take that solo I did. That was going ba 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 ba. So how do we count that? 1, 2, 3, and 4. Sorry, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So because I can count that, I can then sort of interpret it a little bit better. So that's one way of counting. But the other way is also making sure, let's say, for example, you're playing that as a bass drum. Okay, I will do a little bit of this. So I'm going to put this mic sounds terrible through the drums. So I'm going to play the drums quite quietly. Even quietly sounds terrible, but so counting through something. Let's say, for example, I wanted to play that rhythm on the bass drum. Now, granted, I can kind of already do this, but let's say that this was something I was practicing. So I wanted to get 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So if I count along with that, okay, with 8th note hi-hats and 2 and 4 snare drum. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Or if I wanted to slow it down further, then it's important to maybe count all of it. So 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. 1 and 2. If I need to go even slower, then you can maybe even count sort of the subdivision in between that. But counting along is super, super important when you're practicing. It's going to make sure that you know where you're at. Let's say, for example, that actually the rhythm that I wanted to play was 1, 2, 3, 4 E, but I felt like that was the right rhythm. I would now know that because if I count along, 1, 2, 3, 4. No, I wanted to go 4 E. 1, 2, 3, 4 E. Okay, that's where it wants to be. Because I can count that and because I know that, it means that I can then be more confident that I'm getting it correct. I need to plug my laptop in, otherwise it's going to die. Hopefully this will stay in. Charging, wicked. Okay, so counting out loud, super, super important. I'm going to run through the rest of this because we're running out of time a little bit. What have we got here? Oh, cool. Armin's put a question here. Have you ever had to learn a song before a live performance with very limited time to learn it? Absolutely, yeah. Part of being a professional drummer is sometimes being called upon in the last minute. One of the things that I did with pre-COVID and hopefully post-COVID as well was to jump in kind of either last minute or just with a band that I'd never played before. It's what we call depping. You're kind of deputy to the drummer that was there. I may answer that question in a little bit more detail another time, but in general, yeah, I definitely have had to do that. And there's so many ways of like learning things fast. And a lot of that, for me at least, the biggest tip I can give to you to learn things fast is to learn how to transcribe or learn how to sort of write things out pretty quickly. I would not get through basically any of the gigs that I did, again, post-COVID, pre-COVID, sorry, if I didn't have kind of like a cheat sheet to that, because how the hell am I going to remember 40 songs or 50 songs? And if I'm depping in a bunch of different bands, I'm certainly not going to remember all those as well. So being able to transcribe is going to be really important to kind of learning things at kind of a last minute as well. Great question though. I'll probably make a note of that and yeah, get into a bit more detail. If you want to, I can talk to you that during the lesson, obviously, but we can also sort of, if everyone else is a bit is interested in kind of transcribing stuff, I need to do some transcribing at some point, so maybe I'll live stream a transcription, for example. Okay, so running through this. The other thing is, I did this a second ago when I was sort of demonstrating that idea, is slowing things down. I can't tell you how many times I have a student here and they're struggling with a particular part and they can't play it, even if they repeat it over and over and over again, and they're getting stressed out, and I say, right, slow it down, and they can play it, okay? So even if you have to, let's go back to that example, even if you have to go 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and even super slow like that. It doesn't even sound like the groove anymore. But slowing things down means you can focus on your accuracy, and that's going to make a big, big difference. So slowing things down, that's another tip for you. Also, let's say, for example, that was a groove within a song, or with this track I was working on a minute ago. With that, again, the biggest part of this is isolating your mistakes, essentially. So in that song, which is 200 odd bars long, there's probably 50 I don't know, I'm guessing, but let's say 30 bars in there that I know are real kind of problem bars. I need to jump in and practice just those bars. That's isolation, basically. So that's another real practice key. I'm probably going to get into that in a bit more detail, but most of you have kind of seen that during the lesson anyway. And then the other thing, another little tip here is just think about the pattern first. So when I slowed it down a second ago, I wasn't so much focused on the timing, and sometimes you can kind of stutter your way through things, but if you focus on the pattern first, get that right, make sure your counting is correct, make sure you're playing the pattern kind of, not necessarily accurately in time, but accurately in the terms of kind of the placement of the notes, or the counting of the notes, or the orchestration, for example, or whatever else, making sure the pattern is correct is important, then focus on the timing. If you can play the pattern first, timing second. And finally, it's something that I try to do a little bit, but don't do too often, is to film myself and watch it back. You'll be surprised how eye-opening it can be, in a good way and in a bad way sometimes, to watch yourself back and be like, oh, okay, there's an issue, there's an issue, there's an issue. Or sometimes that bit sounds really good. Maybe I should do more of that in my playing. Or I like that area of my playing, but I would like this area to be as good as that. So then okay, looking at yourself can be really quite eye-opening. Again, it's what I'm seeing when you guys are playing here, but when you're practicing at home, sometimes you can kind of miss that listening aspect of your practice. So definitely filming little clips, even if it's just a particular fill you're working on and you think, oh, that sounds quite good, I'll film it and then watch it back. You'll be like, oh, okay, I can see that my my ghost notes are too high, for example, or I'm actually missing the bell or the ride cymbal in that particular fill, whatever it would be. And then finally, just some kind of practice tools. I'm going to run through these kind of quickly because we're running out of time, unfortunately. But so in short, here's my list of practice tools to use. The obvious ones are like a metronome app. I can be quite lazy sometimes and just use the metronome on Google, for example. But if you download an app, there's going to be lots of different features on that. And it's kind of nice having a metronome here, for example, that you can just go, great, speed up, cool, play along, pause it, and not have to go to Google and sort of drag it and do all that kind of stuff. So a metronome app, I use an app called Pro Metronome. There's a free version, there's a paid version. Just grab the free version and use that for a bit, and there's a couple of features that you will probably go to use and they'll be like, nope, you need the pro version. If so, it's like £2 or something. Then also kind of on top of that as well, I like to do my warm-up at the start on a practice pad rather than a snare drum. This is for a couple of reasons. It's good to practice on a practice pad because you can kind of hear the articulation of your sticking a lot clearer. Sometimes the kind of buzz of the snare wires or the kind of ring of the snare or even just the general sort of tuning of the snare can kind of mask some of the articulation in your sticks. So it can be, again, quite eye-opening to practice on a practice pad, a rubber kind of pad, to kind of hear yourself a little bit better. And then a couple of other little things. I think I've spoke to most of my students about using this website, and I was using it earlier to practice. Is a website called Tune Transcriber. I assume is to help people transcribe music, but it also slows songs down. You can also kind of loop sections and sort of create kind of markings in it, and all this kind of stuff, which is really great. But essentially using that to slow songs down, and there's a bunch of different ways you can slow songs down. You can use something like Tune Transcriber. I believe there's an app on iOS called like the Amazing Slow Downer or something like that. It's not on Windows or on Android, so only for kind of iOS users. But I think that does exactly the same thing. Or if you're going to use the next thing that I think is kind of the ultimate tool, then that will also help with that. Finally, before I say about the final thing, is one of the useful things about Pro Metronome, and some people have this on their electric kits, you can probably find it other places as well, but using a metronome that gives you a voice, so something that goes 1, 2, 3, 4, because it's going to be so obvious, if we go back to the room, 1, 2, 3, 4. If the click is just saying random numbers, then you know you're not in time, and you can also use an 8th note click, so I could say 1, and 2, and it just allows you to kind of really hone in on exactly where you are within the bar, which is great. So a voice counting click, that's another thing. And then finally, the kind of what I would coin as the ultimate practice tool is what we call a DAW, a digital audio workstation, basically music editing software. So something I use a software called Pro Tools for Mac users, maybe using GarageBand is their free kind of music editing software. It's great, it's perfect for this. Or their paid one, Logic is great as well. Or if you want to be a little bit more creative, using something like Ableton Live, or even I believe like Fruity Loops and stuff like that will also have this kind of function. But essentially, using a DAW, digital audio workstation, means you can, and this is how I've been practicing that song at the start. I put it into Pro Tools. I put a metronome underneath the track as well, so I can kind of I can do different temp. I can change the volume of the backing track if I want the click a bit louder, or I like to kind of fade the click out a little bit, so I'm paying more attention to the music. You can also slow it down in there as well. Like we said with Tune Transcriber, you can do that in there, and you can set the good thing about using a DAW is you can set the tempo. So that song is 125. Quite regularly, I just type in 90, and it chucks the track down to 90 BPM with a click. So I know that I'm practicing at 90, and I can just work my way up to 125. So that's really useful. And then the biggest, best, ultimate feature of using a DAW as a practice tool is being able to repeat certain sections and saving your work with that as well. So you can do this on Tune Transcriber. It's a little bit more fiddly. With something like Pro Tools, you can put a grid in there and you can say, great, from bars 4 to 9, for example, I want to loop those 4 bars. And you just go cut, press it, and then it just loops those 4 bars around. And you'll be surprised how efficient your practice can be if you can use something like that to kind of repeat sections around. So a DAW is by far my favorite practice tool. Cool, okay, that kind of brings us to the end. What I would like to do very briefly before we finish, before we finish, I want to ask you guys a question quickly. If you do, what one item do you use every time you practice, other than the obvious like sticks on your kit, for example, or a metronome? Is there a particular item that you guys use that you use more or less every time, or when you do use it, you realize, oh, this is going to help me practice that? So let's see if anyone's going to respond to that. So if you want to tell me a little bit about kind of what you use to practice. So while we're doing that, or while you guys are having to think about that and responding to that, I'm going to have a little bit of a play. So I'm just going to sit with a drum groove for a minute. And again, actually, no, I'll tell you what, I'll do that other creative thing. Here's a rudiment. I'm going to take a single stroke roll. Everyone knows a single stroke roll. So here's a little drum solo based around a single stroke roll, while you guys are answering the question of what tools do you use when you practice? What things do you need every time you practice, for example? So here we go. Cool. There you go. You've had plenty of time to answer. So I'm going to take that as I've given you all of the tools you need and I've spoken to you about them before. So hopefully there's some cool tools there. If you aren't using things when you, like certain tools when you practice, then feel free to take inspiration from the stuff that I've talked about today. That's pretty much it we've got time for. So again, thanks everyone for joining. Again, all the kind of usual stuff of subscribe, hit the bell notification and stuff like that. Again, if you can put any questions, maybe Armin, if you want to put that question into Notion as well, then I'll make sure I get around to doing that. Maybe in a separate part. Any other questions you got during the week, just chuck them in your Notion notes at the bottom, and we'll be sure to kind of go through those. If you prefer, go follow on Twitch, and we'll be streaming on there as well. At the moment, I'm just kind of focusing on YouTube because we seem to be kind of correlating here. But yeah, if you prefer using Twitch, then feel free to go over there and watch on there. And that's it for now. Again, thanks a lot for joining in, and I'll see you guys all really soon. Maybe even sooner than next week. Well, I will see most of you before next week. So yeah, great. Have fun. Keep practicing. Use if you missed any of it, then go back. It will be straight on YouTube anyway. So if you missed anything, then you can go back and rewatch it. And yeah, I'll see you guys. See all you guys next week. Take care.